Okay, I have to admit I'm really excited about this part. It isn't often I get to rub elbows with somebody of the stature of our Lifetime Achievement Award winner this year. But before I bring him up on stage, I'd like to just say a few words about what the award is and what the criteria is. The MDEA Lifetime Achievement Award is an individual whose contributions during a long career have had a demonstrable impact on business issues, technology issues, and also cultural advancements in medical devices. In the selection process, we took nominations from our entire content team and our editorial advisory board. From that point, we narrowed it down to 3 finalists. And I have to admit, when I saw the bio of one of the finalists, who happened to be the winner, it was very clear that he embodied what this award is all about. Mr. Mann has dedicated 42 years of his life to the development of medical device technologies. His current company, Mankind Corporation, is a diversified biopharmaceutical company that's focused on the development of novel therapeutics and drug delivery techniques for the treatment of diabetes, cancer, autoimmune, and inflammatory diseases. The company's lead product mimics the insulin kinetics of a normal pancreas, and that creates a new therapy paradigm for diabetes. But what really got me is that when I saw the line that said, Mr. Mann has been involved in creating technologies that have enabled a deaf child to hear, a blind person to see, and a crippled person to walk. Mr. Mann holds BS and MS degrees in physics from UCLA and honorary doctorate degrees from USC, Johns Hopkins University, Western University, and an institute in Israel. He's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering and has received numerous honors and awards in both the private and public sector. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring up Mr. Alfred Mann, the winner of the MDEA Lifetime Achievement Award.
I want to thank MDEA and MDDI for this extraordinary award. You know, I receive a number of awards, but this one is very special because this is the key magazine, the key organization involved with medical device development, which has been the heart of my career. People often ask me why at my advanced age I still work 70 or 80 hours a week. The answer is it's not really work. It really is such a rewarding and stimulating activity, and it has kept me busy for so many years. What has fired my passion has been, and still is, to develop and commercialize products to meet unmet and poorly met medical needs. After a successful foray into electro-optical physics and semiconductors, I decided to devote my past 42 years to founding, funding, and leading 17 companies and 4 operating foundations, including 3 institutes at elite research universities. My objective of the institutes has been to advance early stage ideas to the point where there is a reasonable opportunity for success. The story of my career development is really somewhat unusual. I had no business experience or background and no expectation that would have led me into entrepreneurial activity. All this began when the name entrepreneurship hadn't even been coined. I was a young scientist working in an area of electro-optical physics some 55 years ago. In the spring of 1956, the U.S. Army came to me asking for an help in an anti-tank missile guidance control system. They needed something in an electro-optical specialty that I was pioneering. I was in an employment situation where I really couldn't help them, and so there was nothing I could really do for them, but I gave them some advice, and they took my recommendation to their vendor, who said they couldn't do it. And so in 1956, the U.S. Army actually set me up in business. That doesn't happen much anymore, I guess, but that was really fun. Much happened over the next few years, and that company, which is named Spectralab, became very successful, expanding into a number of electro-optical and semiconductor technologies, and enjoying a significant participation in the Free World Space Program. That company, by the way, is still alive, part of the Boeing company today. It was fun a few years ago, and they invited me back to celebrate the 50th anniversary of my first company. The Applied Physics Laboratory is a government laboratory managed by Johns Hopkins, and it was a good customer of Spectrolab for spacecraft systems, and they were trying in the late 1960s to apply advanced engineering precepts developed in the military and aerospace programs to try to solve medical problems. One such program was directed to creating a long-lived cardiac pacemaker. Pacemakers in those days lasted about 18 months. They were large, and they took fairly heavy major surgery, I guess, to replace them. And so Hopkins came to me and persuaded me to start a venture to develop a pacemaker that would last at least 5 years and hopefully 10. Well, that project it really initiated the transition of my career into medical product development. And over the past several decades, I've devoted my life to addressing a variety of unmet and underserved medical needs. As noted, to address these needs, I founded a number of companies. The Pacemaker Project was developed at Pace Center Systems, which is now the cardiac rhythm management segment of St. Jude Medical. Early this year, I learned that our second pacemaker patient, implanted in July of 1972, is still alive and still using that same pacemaker after 37 years. I guess we beat our 5-year target. The excitement of making such a difference in people's lives really changed my career. And since then, I've founded another 9 medical product companies and several technology companies. I've taken 2 of these public and have sold 8 of them for about $8 billion. So it's been pretty successful. This slide shows the timeline of most of the Alfred Mann companies, and with my aerospace, military, and electronic companies on the top, and the timeline, and the medical companies on the bottom. My most successful venture was MiniMed, now Medtronic Diabetes, which pioneered insulin pumps and continuous glucose sensors. And these have transformed therapy, especially for type 1 diabetes. There was Advanced Bionics, which created cochlear implant systems that enabled the deaf to hear really well, even to enjoy music. And then there's Second Sight, which has developed a system to provide a degree of sight for people who are blind. And then Bioness and the Alfred Mann Foundation are creating devices that are enabling the deaf and the lame to walk. So that's really sort of an exciting time to be able to enjoy all of these wonderful things. There have been a number of other devices as well. There's been the satisfaction of improving their lives and even extending people's lives that has energized me over the years. Among my current activities, the most significant one is Mankind Corporation, whose primary effort is directed to diabetes. From my experience at MiniMed, I learned a great deal about the problem. And while insulin pumps pioneered at MiniMed have really contributed so very much to improve the outcomes in type 1 diabetes, they're not very often used in type 2 because of the complexity and because of the cost. And a dozen years ago, I was really worried because it seemed to me that there was a likely outbreak of type 2 diabetes that would really grow rapidly, and in fact has become a pandemic worldwide. It is indeed a great problem, the greatest problem facing the world today. This slide shows an earlier outdated estimate of global prevalence done by the International Diabetes Federation. And you see that last year they were saying there were 285 million people. They now recognize it's closer to 400 million people in the world with diabetes, and growing by 50% in the next 20 years. Indeed, one of the things that was most shocking is just about 2 or 3 months ago, there was an article published that was a study that was sponsored by United Healthcare that projected that in 9 years, in 2020, in the United States, 1/2 of all adults will either be diabetic or pre-diabetic, and pre-diabetes is really just an early stage of the disease. We really need to find better solutions to address this pandemic, which is threatening the entire world. Diabetes is really a family of diseases. The two major ones are type 1 and type 2. And diabetes is really a description of the inability to control glucose. Glucose is the fuel of the body. You need it 24/7 in every one of your cells. You can't really metabolize glucose, though, without insulin. So, and the glucose comes from the meals you eat, and between meals, your liver supplies the glucose. Now, in type 1 diabetes, the cells that produce the insulin are destroyed, and in late stage type 2 diabetes, your pancreas is just worn out. And so in both of those cases, you need to have insulin supplied from outside or you can't survive. But in earlier stage type 2, there are a lot of things you could do to try to improve the output of insulin or to make the body more sensitive to the insulin. A lot of things that you can do, but frankly, all of these things have serious consequences, or they either have side effects or they don't really do the job adequately. We really need a better solution. And really, insulin is the key. And the problem is that current insulins are not adequate. Most importantly, they last far too long. It's that excessive persistence long after you've digested a meal, which is the primary problem with current insulin therapy. So what we really need to do is to find a better insulin. And that's really what we've been working on for the last dozen years at Mankind Corporation. And now what we have done is we've created, this shows you the kinetics, or the dynamics, I should say, of insulins. In the yellow curve, you see what you have in I don't have a laser here, I don't think, but in the yellow curve you see that the insulin survives long after you've digested a meal. You sort of digest a meal in maybe 3 hours, and it lasts for maybe 9 to 12 hours. In the red curve, which is a development about 15 years ago by Lilly and Novo first, this is a rapid-acting analog where it acts somewhat faster, maybe for 5 to 7 hours, much better, but still much longer than what you need to digest a meal. The blue curve is the result of this development at Mankind Corporation, which creates kinetics and dynamics that really mimic what you see in a healthy person without diabetes. So now, what does this mean? Next slide, please. What you do at the beginning of a meal is all you do is take this little device for a half a second, and that's all you need to do, and it creates these ideal kinetics. And what you see from that, next slide, please. But what happens is we create these little particles. It's the pH particle, sensitive particle that has a lot of surface area, a lot of little platelets, and we electrostatically bond the insulin to those platelets in monomeric form. This is the first time anybody's been able to create a stable form of insulin monomers. You take the breath, about half the insulin gets into the deep lung, and then from there it becomes active. It goes immediately across the barrier in a matter of minutes into the deep lung, or into the arterial system, I mean, and that creates many wonderful advantages. The next slide, please. Some of the benefits, the key benefits, is it lowers the rise after you start a meal, usually by a factor of about 2. Far lower risk of dangerous hypoglycemia. Really, what we see very little hypoglycemia, and most of it's caused by the basal insulins that are used along with this. but we can't make a claim that it doesn't cause hypoglycemia. It's really weight neutral. All that we can say is less weight gain, because people can gain weight from other things than just taking insulin. The reason you gain weight with insulin therapy is that to avoid the hypoglycemia, you have to snack all day long and your liver is pouring out glucose to keep you from going into a coma. But we're essentially weight neutral. You don't need to do complex meal titration. You basically take the same dose for almost everything you eat. If you eat a huge meal, you take 2 doses. And if you take a very small snack, you don't have to take anything. Interestingly, it lowers insulin resistance and therefore lowers fasting glucose levels. And this is something very significant. The key opinion leaders are saying that in fact this is likely to slow and even stop the progression of type 2 diabetes, because it removes the stress on both the pancreas and the liver. There's little need for prandial glucose measurements if you don't have much risk of hypoglycemia and you don't have all this excessive persistence. And if you can lower the fasting glucose levels, you'll be able to lower overall average glucose levels, which are measured in something called hemoglobin A1C. It's a way of really changing diabetes. There have been no safety signals with Afrezza because we're transitioning to this smaller, simpler, and less expensive and more efficient device. The FDA is requiring us to do 2 more studies, so it won't be on the market until probably another 2 years. But I remain very committed to this. I'm confident that Afrezza will change the paradigm of diabetes, which is the greatest scourge facing the world today. So what I'd like to say is that this is just maybe the cap to my career of 42 years and more, because I'm not done yet. I've set my retirement date at July 1st, 2047. I'm really trying to do what I can with what years I have left to try to find solutions for poorly met and unmet medical needs. And I want to thank the organization here for honoring not just me, but all of my colleagues who've made these achievements so successful. And I want to thank MDEA and MDDI for this particular honor. Thank you all.